minute, Monty. We're trying to get to.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Let's Talk Racing. Is that quick enough? We got Monte Dutton on the line with us already. Been doing a little chatting already. Go ahead, Al. Let me
continue what we started on here. Monty, we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame, something you and I talked about the other day for great length. You've been watching the sport longer than most people. You know who the great ones were, the great ones who are. You know the ones who should and should not be in the Hall of Fame. Your overall impression of the five. Give me your first initial impression of the five who made it in, and we'll go from there.
Well, you might have to prompt me a little bit. I'm off the top of my head, but I expected Jerry Cook to make it. He's sort of the it's sort of like Jerry Cook and Richie Evans were the dynamos of modified racing, and basically Richie Evans was the legend, and Cook, and probably won more races, and Cook was very consistent, and won more championships, and then Cook went to work for NASCAR and was instrumental in continuing those series and things. So he's been sort of on the list and waiting for a while, so I think that he was kind of like the establishment guy that a lot of people who represent the tracks and NASCAR officials and all rallied around. I guess the big surprise was not that Bruton Smith was named to it, but it's the leapfrogged over the other people last year. I understand largely because of the fact that Bruton and the Francis have been rivals many times, but apparently Brian France really went to bat for him, and Bruton is certainly Bruton's kind of the last Tyson, I think. He's always been a guy who had that, what should we do? And someone says something half joking, well, what we could do this, and he said, and then Bruton said, that's what we'll do when the other person hadn't even been serious when he mentioned it, Nobody ever thought in the wildest dreams they would have had condos overlooking a racetrack, and I guess that probably looked a lot better 10 years ago than it does now. But daring to put lights at a super speedway when people didn't think it. Now most of the tracks in the country have them, and so Bruton's a great innovator, and I think that he belongs. I think that there's a lot of political correctness in both those first two selections, because there's certainly other people. I think that probably the split that Bruton Smith had with Humpy Wheeler probably works against Humpy's chances, but that's a guy who ranks right there with him in terms of being a visionary about the sport. And gosh knows, I think the sport could use a few visionaries now.
Monty, does it bother you that a man who sat in an office and wore a coat and tie and made phone calls would get in ahead of a champion, such as, well, Benny Parsons, for example? Does that bother you at all that Bruton may have bumped Benny because of Brian France's influence?
Well, we're going to always have these arguments, and they're going to be arguments, involving people like, say, Raymond Parks is someone that a lot of people think should be in. There are always going to be those things. It's just like, I'm going to tell you, my personal quibble is I've always disliked Hall of Fames having a person who is a media member in, and just because I think it's kind of a conflict, and I think that there should be a wing of the Hall, and I think they should be honored in that way, but not, one of the things that you and I, is my opinion, is that to be in the Hall of Fame, you got to be famous. And so a lot of times behind the scenes people, I sort of think that the big heroes are the ones that should go in. But as a general rule, I didn't have any major problem with the class of people in there. I think that, it's a political body, and it's a political body in the sense that they're going to try to have somebody who can bring people in, who draws attention to the Hall of Fame, and there are going to be some people who get in awfully quick because of that. But given the nature of it, I think that the people in this class belong there in every sense of the word.
But
it wouldn't have been the big ones I picked, but
Okay.
So at least one that I would have picked, it wasn't even in the nominees.
And that was Smokey Yunick,
He was one, yeah.
Paul Sawyer maybe, Tim Richmond.
Well, I'm just saying, there are people in there. The one I was really thinking of was Smokey Yunick, because I would have been inclined toward him because, first of all, he's a brilliant innovator, but I know that he's not going to make it because he and Bill France were persona non grata, and Smokey never even tried to make up. You know, so I think it's unlikely he's going to make it in, but I'd love to see it.
You have no trouble with or no issue with Terry Labonte being in on the first ballot?
Well, I think that maybe like you, I might have voted for Benny Parsons because he was both a champion driver and had a really strong influence on the sport as a broadcaster. And so I think that I would have chosen Benny over Terry. But Terry did win 2 championships 12 years apart. I'm saying he probably would have been my 5, but I think I would just basically, look, I'm not on the committee. I don't have a vote. And so I think that it doesn't behoove me. I'm just saying, my judgment is not on who belongs in this year's class. My judgment, basically from a distance, is do the people who have been selected belong in the Hall of Fame? And so if that stands, I like the list there. I'm happy Bobby Isaac made it particular, by the way.
Yeah, you know, I'm a little bit surprised because I have been in those meetings in recent years when Bobby Isaac's name was hardly ever mentioned, and at the time he was being ignored, as he is now. He was the second or third winningest driver, not already in eligible driver, I should say. He was the second, either the leading or the second leading eligible driver not in the Hall of Fame. And I thought maybe people were just going to ignore him because, as you well remember, when he raced, there was not much TV, not a whole lot of radio, certainly not as much coverage as there was at other times, and it seemed like Bobby kind of got ignored for a while.
By the way, he did win a race on TV.
Well, but he was not one of those guys. Yeah.
Let me just tell you that I was at it. He won the race. It was live, flag to flag on Wild World of Sports from Greenville Pickens Speedway.
Oh, okay.
1970. It's the only time I ever went to Greenville Pickens when the race was in the daytime. And I remember when I was a boy sitting in the stands and watching Jim McKay and Tracy Economaki stand up on the roof of the press box talking before the race started.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy he made it because, first of all, I've got a little bit of a Bobby Isaac guilt complex. Because when I was a boy and went to see him, he won at least 2, maybe 3 races I saw at Greenville Pickens. When Richard Petty won twice on dirt, and when they paved the track, the first few races, Isaac was dominant. And I couldn't stand him when I was a kid. Because in those days, after the race was over, you crossed across the track and you got autographs, took pictures taken. It was like, you know, the grandstand is empty and went across there. And so I had all these little Kodiak Instamatic, and I found Isaac to be very standoffish and, you know, he shied away from people and didn't want to talk to anybody. Well, I found out maybe later because from his best friend David Pearce and from others that Isaac basically had very much of an inferiority complex because he was pretty much an established driver before he ever learned to read and write, and he was self-conscious about his lack of schooling. And so I've always felt bad, you know, as a result of that because I couldn't stand him when I was a kid. And that was the reason, because he wasn't friendly when I was hobnobbing with the race car drivers. He was the anti-Richard Petty, so to speak.
Yeah. For some reason, Monty, I was a little bit surprised, pleasantly surprised, when Curtis Turner finally made it in. Surprised in that I didn't know whether the NASCAR-centric members of the committee still felt like he and Big Bill were enemies and did not deserve to be in. Surprised that his numbers were really not truly impressive, except when you look at the times in which he raced. But you probably saw Turner race a time or two. I understand that he was such a crowd favorite that NASCAR was basically pressured into letting him come back by track owners and operators whose crowd simply would not attend if he were not there. Are you happy that Turner made it in?
Yes, because I think he's one of the true legends. Old timers say that Curtis Turner was the best dirt driver to ever live, and they also say that he's the only driver that anybody ever saw who would basically win by turning his car sideways going down the straight and still keep it churning enough to win the race. Probably it's pretty useful to keep it wide enough that people couldn't pass him. But I'm saying people, the old timers say he's the only guy who could do it, you know. And so, you know, so much of his life, right down to the controversy surrounding his death in a plane crash. I mean, he was a guy who was like made and lost millions speculating in lumber, you know, and you know, raced legendary for his racing and his partying. I mean, he was like you know, like in today's world, he would be the he's like a Paul Bunyan or something.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot, and so I really thought he had to get in. I think it's sort of amazingly coincidental that he and his partner / rival, you know, Bruton Smith, who were basically, you know, wheel partners and wheeler dealers, and both of them went broke, and you know, Bruton left and came back, you know, multi-millionaire and got the track back. But I mean, they worked together on building Charlotte Motor Speedway, and then they split dramatically in the disaster that befell them afterwards. And so I thought it was interesting that those two guys got in at the same time.
I don't remember specifically whether Brian France spoke as eloquently for Curtis Turner as he did for Bruton Smith. But as we have discussed before, the NASCAR Hall of Fame has enough members with close ties to NASCAR, by that I mean very close ties, that they can pretty much vote in whoever they want. And the instant that Brian France spoke in favor of Bruton Smith, I thought it was a done deal. We were told in the meeting that we could discuss our individual votes, but we should not talk about who other people spoke for. And I was going to respect that instruction until I picked up the Charlotte paper on Thursday and read a big story in which it was very widely circulated and completely explained that Brian France stood up for Bruton and quoted people as speaking for Bruton. So I figured, well, you know, if the cat's out of the bag, there's no need to hold it back now. But Brian France had I think the instant he stood up and talked, that was a done deal. And as soon as Bruton got in, I think personally, Benny Parsons got kicked out.
You know why? You know what the difference between NASCAR and the Mafia is, don't you?
Not much.
Well,
there's some things the Mafia won't do.
Yeah. Okay. You were right. The first guy you spoke of was Jerry Cook, and it's not any secret that Jerry Cook shamelessly lobbied for himself the entire time he was on the ballot. I remember the first time I was in a meeting, Jerry walked up and introduced himself and reminded me he was still on the ballot and still not in the Hall of Fame. And I said, yes, Mr. Cook, I understand that. He said, well, just remember that. And every subsequent year he did the same thing. This year he was not in the room because being on the ballot, they had recused him, which they had not done in previous years, which surprised me. But anyway.
That probably also speaks to his likelihood of getting in.
Yeah. But certainly Jerry Cook deserved to be in. You know, certainly Bobby Isaac as a former champion deserved to be in. Terry Labonte as a two-time champion deserved to be in. You can't really argue with Bruton, although the timing of it, I hated, in fact I did not vote for Bruton. I just thought a guy who had done things on the racetrack, I just felt like a driving champion trumped a businessman, but others didn't, so that was okay. But
how did you feel about it? How do you feel about Hendrick and Richard Childress?
I would vote for Childress ahead of Hendrick, and the reason being, I think I think Richard Childress has come a much more difficult path to the success he's enjoyed than Rick did. Now that probably should not be a factor. The end game, as they call it, or the bottom line, should be the reason. And clearly, Rick has a better track record, more wins, more poles, more everything than Childress. But Rick started with a somewhat substantial advantage over Richard Childress. And Richard was a racer to begin with. He was not a very good one, or not a very successful one. I don't know how good he was. He wasn't very successful. And Richard started basically ground level or below, and Rick started, penthouse and maybe just above. So my personal vote will be, when it comes time, will be Childress first and then Hendrick. But I hope the champions still get in. I hope Benny Parsons, I hope Mike Stefanik gets in ahead of either one of those two gentlemen. So I don't.
One thing that we talked about the other day, and I'm not against it, but I think you know that I mentioned this, is how about this? Did you name another Hall of Fame where it is not just reserved for people that play in the major leagues?
Yeah, you're right, but they call it the NASCAR Hall of Fame. They don't even call it the. Well, is the one in Cooperstown called the Major League Hall of Fame, or just the?
It's like the National Baseball Hall of Fame.
National Baseball. Well, is there anybody in that one who did not make the majors?
Well, I'm just saying. There's a college basketball Hall of Fame, and there's a basketball.
Right,
But I'm just saying. I mean, I was just pointing that out because it just occurred to me probably a day or two before I was talking to you then.
Yeah, you may be right, but I think when they put in Richie Evans, they opened the door for Jack Ingram.
Well, I know. I'm not against.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Somebody I'd love to have in is, the best short track driver I ever saw was Butch Lindley.
Butch Lindley, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. At some point.
Yeah, that's so too. Yeah.
At some point in time, Harry and Butch will be on the ballot. I don't know if they'll make it, but they'll certainly be on the ballot. But and the exception to my rule, with the exception to my stance on champions, is I just can't see myself voting if I'm invited back next year. I cannot see myself voting for Red Byron. I don't care if he was the first champion of stock car racing. I don't care if he was the first modified champion followed by the first Cup champion. He only ran a very, very limited number of events. He was successful in those few events, but in 3 years he was gone. And I just don't know if that cuts it. With me personally, the Hall of Fame may vote him in, but it'll be without my vote.
Well, it's an inspirational story on Red Byron because of the fact that he was a war hero and was handicapped.
I
and so he took a great toll from the war. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just pointing it out that some people would cite that, just as some people would cite Bud Moore's World War II heroism. I mean, I'm not saying it has anything to do with it. I'm just saying that if I was going to make a case, that's why I would. I think one point that you make, by the way, that kind of is talking about the history of NASCAR. There are a lot of legends who most of their success predate NASCAR. One of those is Raymond Parks.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then you have the Roy Hall, Lloyd C. You have the people that won the old races on the Beach Road course. Well, a good many of those people, their success predates the formation of NASCAR.
Well, by your own lofty standard, and I don't disagree with it. Famous, you got to be famous to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know, Monty, if you stopped 100 people at Charlotte last Sunday night and said, "Who is Red Byron?" how many do you think would remember he was the first champion? I don't know. I don't know how.
About the same people who could tell you about Cap Hansen or Mordecai Three Finger Brown.
Maybe so. Yeah. I don't know if he's famous enough.
If you're going to go by that, I'm telling you, these kids that today, you know, they don't know who Mark McGuire was.
I don't believe.
They don't know who Tim Richmond was.
I don't believe. Yeah, I
knowledge of history in every area is on the Great Plains.
But when you talk about champions, I don't remember in the Hall of Fame meetings I've been into. I don't remember the name Bill Rexford ever coming up, and he was the second champion.
You beat me to that. I was about to say that.
Yeah, he was the second champion.
We had a couple of.
Wasn't he the youngest too?
May have been.
I believe that I remember when Jeff Gordon won that the youngest champion was Bill Rexford.
Yeah. Like
2 months earlier or something like that.
And I'm betting that Red Byron was probably the oldest.
The red that should get in is Red Vogt, not Red Byron.
Okay. We had Red Vogt's son on this show not long ago.
Well, he's a great mechanic, and he probably has. The truth of the matter is I was, playing devil's advocate on Red Byron, but basically I agree with you. But that also led me to the fact that there were a lot of very successful people that people talk about that really predate the formation of the sport, and Raymond Parks is one of them, and Red Byron is another. And there's a lot of other people whose renown began before that, and that's one of the reasons that Curtis Turner didn't win more NASCAR races too.
Yeah. Now
he ran all kinds of races.
Yeah. Now, Monty, we've talked about 5 men who were inducted or selected. There was a 6th person who was recognized Wednesday a week ago. Harold Brasington was named the Landmark Award winner, which most people think is an award that goes to a guy who is very, very deserving of recognition but is not Hall of Fame worthy. Your favorite racetrack in all the world, I guess, is still Darlington Raceway. He is a native of South Carolina, as are you. I assume you were happy that Harold Brasington finally got the accolades he was due?
Yes, I'm kind of surprised about that a little bit because Harold Brasington was a really unusual person to be selected for something like that because you have like Bruce Smith and Humpy Wheeler and a handful of other people, maybe a big Bill France, who were great visionaries, but they also were showmen. They're like P.T. Barnum or something. Well, Harold Brasington was basically just a dreamer who went off to Indianapolis and was impressed by running the race and decided he wanted to build a track like that and did it. But then he pretty much got it done. He got bored with it once it got open and built. He later went up and built Rockingham. He was instrumental in that track.
Mm-hmm.
But he was like he was, instead of being like P.T. Barnum, Harold Brasington would be somebody like Emmett the Fix-It Man and Andy Griffith. And so I think it's interesting to me that he did that. But he really was a dreamer. I wrote a book with 7 others called Taking Stock, and we all wrote 3 stories that we hadn't written before. And one of mine was on Darlington, and Harold and Brasington already passed away by then. But I went down and wrote a long book chapter, and I talked to she's also deceased now, but there was a secretary to the president down at Darlington. I wish I could remember her name, but she was then the secretary for Jim Hunter when I was down there, and she talked about how small town odd Harold Brasington was.
Okay. Yeah. Now he the story is true about the minnow pond. So some of our listeners may not have heard it yet.
Yes, I get tickled about this. There's 2 things about Darlington that I laugh every time I hear, because every time there's a race down there, there's this gigantic, well, not gigantic, but a really big pond over behind the turn 4, and they always say that's the minnow pond. Well, the minnow pond, if the shape of that track, was about where the Pearce stands are, and it was, probably you could put my living room inside. It was too big for it. It was a minnow pond, not a fish pond. It was a pond where they grew minnows. And so I laugh at that. And then the other thing I laugh about Darlington is that they always say that the track is abrasive because of sand blown in from the ocean. Hell, the ocean is 60 miles away. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. It's because the ocean came up to that level in prehistoric times, and the track is in what's called the sand hills, where the old beaches were years ago.
Right.
That's why the sand is in the air down there.
For those who don't understand, the western side of the racetrack is considerably narrower and tighter than the eastern side because Harold did not want to disrupt his friend's minnow pond, so he made that turn, what is now three and four, much sharper than he did down the other end at what is now 1 and 2. So,
it's funny, by the way, Al, is that I went to all my races usually I went to as a kid were Darlington or at Greenville Pickens, most of them. But it's so funny about that because when I was a kid and I went to the races at Darlington every year, I never realized the track was egg-shaped. It was only until I read it when I was older. It just when you sit in the stands, you can't really tell.
Yeah, right.
And so it's so funny that so many things I know about racetracks I didn't know when I was sitting on the back stretch with all the Boy Scouts.
Yeah. Well, if you see it from the air, it's pretty easy. But like you say, from down there with the Boy Scouts on a Saturday or a Monday, and I think they used to race on Saturday and Monday. That was.
I was just thinking about that, by the way. The forever thing about the Indy 500 and the Coach 600. I know it'll never happen because they want the rain day. But when I was a boy, it was really easy because the World 600 was on Sunday and the Indy 500 was on Monday on actual Memorial Day.
Right.
And that would work so well if that was true now.
It would be funny. Give you 2 days of race instead of just one. So.
You could run at Charlotte on Sunday, and then Charlotte wouldn't have to call me. There wouldn't be the fact that some people, after they've been watching TV all day, probably cut off the NASCAR race, particularly this particular NASCAR race. And so it would work out so well, but I'm sure that Indy likes Sunday because they want to have Monday as a rain day. That's what the thing holds up. But that would work so well, wouldn't it?
I was just going to mention this past Sunday night's race. At least aero push did not become a factor in the last 10 laps because Carl Edwards was so far ahead of everybody, there was no possibility of aero push becoming an issue.
The answer is the way you cure aero push is to run everybody out of gas.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was funny. I talked to Lynn Wood the other day, and I asked him in an email. I had forgotten how many gallons a tank was now. He said 18 and a half. And I asked him, isn't it unusual to make 93 miles out of a tank of gas? He said, not if you're Carl Edwards. So Edwards apparently is well known for being one of the best fuel savers, as is Brad Keselowski. But, who knew that Greg Biffle was that good? I think he knew Biffle was good. I don't think anybody knew Junior was that good. So the first 3 guys, or maybe the first 4 guys, got 93 miles out of their tank. And poor old Martin Truex, who ran up front all night long and led like a bandit, just couldn't make it and had to finish 5th when he should have been 1st or 2nd. So you're right.
The truth is, the fact is that there haven't been as many fuel races in the last few years as there were 5 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, we were complaining about it all the time. And I think that, I don't know why, but, when they went to the COT, and they still have it now, they reduced the fuel tanks. They went from 22 to 18.5 or 21 to 18.5, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that they would make it where it was more common. But the reason that it doesn't happen is, it would probably happen more. The reason that it doesn't happen is that there are very few races that don't have some kind of caution, debris or whatever, in the last 30 laps.
Yeah.
So that was the gamble that Edwards made. He was going to win that thing if there wasn't a yellow flag. If there had been one, he had. But that was the only way he could win. So it was a great gamble to take.
Yeah, and when Junior, I'm sorry.
He wasn't playing the odds by any means.
No, but when the guys behind him began to slow up knowing they couldn't make it, he could afford to slow up to ensure that he did make it. So, but I tell you, it really wasn't, you know, it just, I don't know, it just wasn't the show it used to be. Or maybe we're just remembering, I don't know.
I've been in a tangle because I had one of those blogs that went sort of viral because, you know, what happened is that someone prominent retweeted it and then a race car driver responded to it, and then it was already fairly popular, but it's like, the day I wrote it, 300 people read it. Next morning, 300 people read it. I go home, go and run a few errands, and I go home and 3,000 people read it. So I've been involved in this because my point is that, all right, and I understand that, you know, Arrow pushed that to a certain extent that it's true that you can't do anything about it. But the fact is that when you watch a bunch of slick Indy cars that are way more high-tech than stock cars, you know, and you watch them and they look like a bunch of fighter planes having dogfights, it made me realize that that's what NASCAR has lost. It's not lead changes. It's the nature of the racing. It's the fact that you never have two guys duel lap after lap after lap. A guy moves up, looks over here, looks over there, slips fast, and then flies away. And on the intermediate tracks, it's that breathtaking duel where guys swap the lead, you know, 10 times in 5 laps or something, or the ending of a race like that. Well, in 2001, 2002, you remember the Kevin Harvick's first win in Atlanta. You remember Carl Edwards out winning, I think over Bobby Labonte in his first victory, also Atlanta. And also you remember those all-star races from the 92. When I hear Kevin Harvick say, well, it was there then, they just didn't know it. I mean, the fact is, look at the all-star race. Boy, that used to be something like, boy, it's like, you know, it's like getting ready to go watch a gunfight. And man, I can't, somebody told me I was wrong, but I can't remember any good all-star races. Or at least I don't remember the nature of how good it was in like 10 years. All right, I'm through.
Yeah, you're right. You may be right. I remember, obviously, the night that Kyle and Dale and Davey had that classic finish. That still, to me, Monty, stands as the most memorable moment in my career, sitting in that media center or standing in that press box and looking down, and a half an hour after that race, people were still standing there in the grandstand. They just didn't want to leave. They did not want to leave because they had seen something spectacular at night on a 1.5-mile track, and I guess they were just trying to process it or bring it to them time after time. But I looked down and I said to somebody, hell, nobody's leaving. They're all still here. So, and that was a great, as you remember, that was a great moment.
Well, I remember a lot of things. On up in the 90s, I remember details. My favorite story from the All-Star race is that I was sitting next to a sports writer who was a persnickety sort, and back in those days we had a bunch of, you know, press box pools. And this guy who's sitting next to me had Ernie Irvin, and Ernie was running away with the first segment, second segment, and the guy was sitting next to me, and he was talking about he thought he might buy himself a rototiller or get him some. He was already spending the money, you know. And Ernie went through the infield grass to try to pass on the second segment, not even the money segment, and crashed into the wall and about knocked it down. And the guy sitting next to me, well, he was sitting there, and I will not use the vulgarity that he used, but he was pecking away at his little Radio Shack, and he was going, and he said, I ain't got time now, but I'm going to excoriate that guy, excoriate that bleepity bleep in my column. And that's one of the funniest things I ever saw in press room.
Well, at least Ernie was trying to make a pass in the grass.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you had things like that happen. You had the wildest things. It was like race car drivers. It was like, you know, I used to think that the way they would have, you know, it was like they raised the temperature. You know, they had all these fireworks and you know, like some death-defying stunt before the race, and the crowd would be in such a lather that I thought that it was like it had an effect on the drivers, and they drove like complete maniacs. because of the atmosphere made it where there wasn't any other way. Well, it's not like that now.
Well, it's nice to have been alive long enough, and you have been alive long enough to remember that it was not a pass in the grass. It was
That's right.
it was a maintain in the
It
grass.
was a stay in the lead in the grass.
Stay in the lead in the grass. But they still call it, I think,
Yeah, it's a
I
different
think in
pass.
recent years, those of us who know better have kind of beaten down the track PR machine that keeps wanting to talk about the pass in the grass that wasn't. So,
Let me tell you the way sports writers are. It's the same way we're writers, so we're peculiar, and then all of a sudden, we can get in trouble if we don't put right things that are accurate. And so, one of the things about that, this is how much of this is how anal retentive I am. The first time I saw the movie The Natural, when Roy Hobbs hit the home run that busted the clock at Wrigley Field, it was the opening day of the movie. I just covered a minor league game, and everybody in the audience was oohing and ahhing at all the lights, the lights crashing down in slow motion of Robert Redford running around the bases. I was sitting in there with this friend of mine. I said, I hate to tell you folks, but the Cubs still got it at bat. It was the top of the night. So everybody else was getting all weepy, and I said, hey, to tell you, but the Cubs still got a chance to win this thing.
yeah. Did you see what A-Rod did today?
I did.
He's pretty good.
I mean, I didn't see it. I was
Yeah.
watching the Red Sox get beat again, but I heard about it.
Like him or not, he's come back pretty good, I think.
He may be the most unloved athlete who ever lived. Yes, he's good. Barry Bonds was good, but Jose Canseco was good.
Yeah.
But, he's an unbelievable athlete, but he's almost like, I think he's sort of like, he's probably what we deserve as fans, because he is both great and utterly selfish.
Yeah, but I tell you, it was pretty impressive what he's done this early in the year. The other kid to watch out for, and I'm sure you are, is Chris Bryant, kid from the Cubs.
Yeah.
He's going to be pretty
Is
good.
this show baseball tonight?
I was just wondering that.
No, we just.
Yeah, I know he is.
I just want to talk about something
I'm
other
a huge baseball fan, but of course I'm going to run down A-Rod because I love the Red Sox and have my whole life. So you're just not going to get a nice comment from me about the, if he'd ever played for the Red Sox, that would have been different because I'm a fan and I'm completely nuts. That's why I always said I love baseball way too much to write about it because I don't want to know what jerks all the Red Sox are.
All right, Monty. Listen, I appreciate you calling us. We always like to devote a show to the Hall of Fame, and you're always one of the most insightful, intelligent, and entertaining guests we have. We appreciate it more than I can say. Write it down right now. In October, I'm coming to Clinton and we'll have lunch on the square.
Okay.
You don't have to come to the Peach.
All right, take care.
And
I
Sandy,
appreciate y'all having me.
yeah,
I hope they don't shut that show down.
And I told Sandy today.
No way.
I told Sandy today I might hear from you. She said, "Give Monty my love."
Well, I'm so sorry for her loss. I
Yeah.
shouldn't know.
I hate
Take care.
Thank you, Monty. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Marty.
Hey, Roger, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
Is this Marty O'Brien?
Right.
Oh my God.
Huh?
Marty O'Brien, is that really you?
In the, whatever.
In the flesh. So I understand you're moving up one leg in the pecking order at the DP.
That's right. I went from 5th out of 5 to 4th out of 4.
Yeah, you're good. You're good now. You're better.
So I moved into the top 4, but it was by default.
Well, that's okay. They all count. They all count.
Yeah, well, you know as well as I. We'll miss Dave Fairbank. I mean, he was a lot of fun and did a great job. 31 years.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know how anyone hangs on that long to a place like that. Have to hear it for you with the daily time, Harold.
Will there be a going away party or any sort of little lunch or a pizza bash or a pot party or something?
Actually, yeah, tomorrow evening I'll tell you about it when we get off the phone. If I said it over the air, there would be more teenage girls flocking to that thing. And even yourself, then we could possibly keep well.
I'll be in Dover tomorrow night, so you gotta go on without me.
Oh, okay.
But give him my regards anyway.
I will. He mentioned you in his farewell column in the paper.
I read that, and along with 1,000 other people.
That's right.
All right, here's why we called you. We have time to kill, and we figure you're as good a killer as any.
Oh.
Not
Hey, Marty, tell him it's a long ride home next time.
Marty would be lucky if he rides to me again, let me tell you that. Well, it's not a basketball weekend, so it won't really matter. Marty, we're talking about the Hall of Fame, and obviously you have covered you've covered racing in general long enough to have some idea about who was great and who was not great, and I'm sure you know who was selected, and maybe you have an idea or opinion about who got left out. But let me ask you the first question, and we got about 15 minutes or 18 minutes to talk about it.
Okay.
What do you feel about men who wear coats and ties and make phone calls and do business deals in an air-conditioned office for all their career versus drivers who actually get out there and race around and put their life on the line in some respects? And drivers sometimes don't get nearly as much respect as businessmen do. My point being, Bruton Smith made the Hall of Fame, Benny Parsons didn't. As something of an educated observer, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree with that observation. Benny Parsons, he had a great career. He's a past champion. He won a Daytona 500. He had a lot of influence in media. I remember, in the early 2000s, late 90s, listening to his radio show and enjoying it. President one time, he did a lot. I think it's inevitable that a Bruton Smith is going to get in at some point. Certainly, I don't think anyone would argue with the Francis going in early, like they did, for their influence on the sport. But certainly, I don't think you're talking about them as much as you are as with Bruton Smith. And yeah, I would agree that a guy like Parsons should probably go in first. But and I've mentioned this to people before. Not just people in the sport, but even people in media that cover NASCAR. You're probably excluded with this, but a lot of them seem to not worship, but really, really admire people who've made a lot of money and who've done things like built racetracks. That it's almost some of the media's fault. It's not just people who are invested in the sport. These are people that there's a lot of media guys on the panel too. That are voting for a guy like Bruton Smith. Sports writer, I would definitely go with the athlete.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Bruton is deserving, and Rick Hendrick is deserving, and Richard Childress is deserving, and maybe Raymond Parks, an old timer, is deserving. But the comment I made the other day to a colleague of mine was that I found it very difficult to vote for a businessman as long as there was a single champion on the ballot, whether it's Cup, Xfinity, Truck, Modified, no matter what it is. To me, a 6 or 7 time champion like Mike Stefanik in New England should get in ahead of anybody who hasn't raced. And they all looked at me like I had 2 heads. So,
well, and what you're saying though underscores one of the problems that the sport, had during its growth period. From I guess the early 1990s until it slowed down about 8 years ago or so. But the almighty dollar was behind every decision. So there are a lot of people in that sport who consider, people who contributed to the dollar more important than people who contributed on the track, if that makes any sense. Because, a lot of the decisions with some of these mile-and-a-half tracks that they go to at the expense of some of the older tracks, and I'm talking not so much about a North Wilkesboro, but cutting out a race at Darlington and, cutting out some other races at short tracks in the South. All those things were so that they could get these cookie cutter mile and a half, on the schedule. And as we've talked about before, they are just, it's better than a sleeping pill to watch those things. They're so bad, and I think that they've helped kill the sport, but they've made the sport a lot of money. So I guess, guys like Bruce Smith are, as you said, are deserving at some point, but are admired so much that, they're going to get first dibs.
Let's go to another Hall of Fame type situation. Although Langley Speedway does not have, at this moment, a Hall of Fame, you have covered Langley long enough, you're familiar enough with the history. Give me, if you had to name right now, if you had to name the first 5 people into the Langley Speedway Hall of Fame, and go back as long as you want, go back as far as you want. In fact, I would suggest you might want to go back a good ways. Who would your 5 Langley Speedway Hall of Famers be?
I have to refresh myself a little more with the history than I have in recent years. I've written some history pieces over time, but some of the people before the era that I started covering, which is basically 1998, are a little bit less familiar to me. I mean, I know, there were some the group that ran in the 1980s. Was a Ray Hendrick and Chestnut Giants for me, not my top 5, but there were a whole bunch of good ones there. But certainly from that era, I would, for what I know about it, I would say Elton Sawyer. The guy, he was the first 3-time.
Let me help you just a minute here. Most likely, if you were on the committee, and you may well be at some point soon, Bill Lowry has got to be in there somewhere. Bill Lowry was one of the first promoters. I don't think Bill Lowry
would certainly, I think, we're talking about putting guys like that in ahead of drivers. I think he would be someone, obviously, that would get some serious racing for the first class.
Well, if you sort of go along with the NASCAR format, they had 3 drivers and 2 administrators their first year. They had Bill Jr., Bill Sr., then they had Richard Dale and Junior Johnson. So let's assume we can name Bill Lowry as one of our top 5. I don't see how you get away with not putting Joe Carver in the first class, because God only knows what would have happened out there if he had not agreed to come in and take over. I really don't know of any other promoter or administrator that would take one of the other 3 spots. I mean, Ray Hendrick was named one of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers, so I think Ray Hendrick certainly's got to be in there.
Right, yeah, I mentioned him outside.
Yeah, and even for
certainly Phil Warren comes to mind.
Well, I'm still going back further. I'm still doing what NASCAR did. I'm getting the old guys first, and Phil and Elton and Mark Wirtz and the Edwards boys and Veluzzo will be in a more recent class. But first class, I'm thinking Bill Lowry, Joe Carver, Ray Hendrick. For all the problems he's had in life, you got to think Tommy Ellis maybe should be in there somewhere. Maybe Sonny Hutchins.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of thinking that at some point in the very near future, I think Langley will have a Hall of Fame. Maybe not a building set aside for that purpose, but a section of the property which lists those names. And you and I and some other people have begun to work on that list of people. But
who was it used to drive the number 8 car back when Sonny Hutchins was driving?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Oh God! The sad part is I know who it's supposed
Where
to be.
does Gene Lovelace fit? I remember.
Yeah.
Yep, that's who it was. Gene Lovelace.
Yep. Yep, Gene Lovelace should be in there somewhere.
That's exactly what I was talking
And
about.
that's the guy I think will get consideration
You
during
what?
the early years.
Paul
The only
That's
reason I
Mark
mentioned
Martin,
Bill
isn't it?
Warren is
No.
because of the, being the
The
first
typing.
one to win 7 late model titles, and that's a guy that you would think that if he, had went a little longer work, he had a little better sponsorship some of those years, might even have more.
Yeah, again, but I'm still going back further. I'm still going back to when they were running modifieds out there. They were running street stocks. I mean, there must have been a number of people who supported that facility and kept it going until the Phil Warrens and the Elton Sawyers and the Charlie Doles and the Bubba Adams and the Edwards boys came in. Again, and I'm asking you because at some point in time, you and I will sit down with Chuck and Bill and some other people, and we'll have to do this. So I'm giving you a little bit of a heads up, so you won't be quite as uninformed as you think you are. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It'll be interesting, too. Do you have to stick to the same formula as NASCAR?
No, you don't have to. But if you do, you can always fall back on them as being, well, if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for us. I think Bill Lowry certainly should be there. Oh, God, we're forgetting the guy who built the place, Henry Click.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like him or not, I mean, Henry, they're your 3 administrators right there. Bill Lowry, Henry Click, and Joe Carver. If you want 2 drivers, pick Ray Hendrick and maybe Sonny Hutchins, maybe a modified driver, maybe Earl Moss, somebody like that. So that's 5 out of about 55 we got to deal with, or 65 actually.
Right.
So, all right. Well, thank you for killing some time for us. We needed that.
Well, yeah, now I can actually get to writing the baseball story of the game I covered.
Yeah. Are you doing lunch tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm sure I am. So,
You want to pick a place now and just settle it now?
I'll always throw out the King as my first, first place.
What about lobster?
Lobster would be tied for first.
Let's do lobster.
All right.
All right, 12:15.
Yeah.
Okay, America, you know now where we're going to be for lunch tomorrow. You may all come out and we will give autographs.
These particular restaurants should be sponsoring Roger since we're plugging them on his show.
Well, In-N-Out Burger would be the
They'd be the number one choice.
In-N-Out Burger would be number 1. Marty, thanks a whole lot. Give my best to Allison, and I'll see you tomorrow at 12:15 with Carol at Lobster. And let me tell you what, hold on.
You're heading over after that?
Yeah, hold on a minute. I'm going to call and be sure she's working. She may be on vacation. But if you do not hear from me, come to Lobster and we'll have Carol. Well, so to speak. All right?
I'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Marty.
Talk to you later, Marty.
All right, how do we cut him off?
Just push the speaker.
Push what?
Button on the left. The big one. There you go.
That one?
Yeah, that's all there is to it.
All right.
Even a writer can figure that one out,
If you show me which big and which is small, yeah. That is the biggest one, though, isn't it?
Yep.
That's Mark Martin.
Yep.
Who's the guy in the red shirt?
Is it
That's Benny Parsons.
Yeah.
Oh, Benny, okay.
That was when we were down at the Victory Junction gang for the unofficial official day.
Oh, okay.
I knew I had a whole bunch of the pictures there.
Mark Martin was a candidate for the Hall of Fame this year, did not make it. There's Tony Stewart's car that used to race fast.
Yep. There's another one for Benny back there behind somebody.
Does the Hall of Fame not have a length of time you have to have been retired?
Yeah, you got to be out, I think, 5 years maybe.
Terry
Or if you
Labonte's
reach,
still,
if you reach a certain age, they waive that because they figure some guys might race till ever.
yeah.
They might race till they're 100.
Yeah.
So that's why Terry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Terry's well over 55.
Let's see. We got Mark Martin, Benny Parsons here as well. I think it's even Reverend Potter there, maybe. Sitting over there in the blue shirt.
Yeah, maybe. What else you got?
Are we off the air? Or are we
No, we're still rolling.
Okay.
There's Eli Gold, there's Tony,
And Mark.
there's Mark.
Can the audience see our pictures?
Nah.
Too bad for you.
Let's see. What we got? Here you go. Chris Economaki.
Stan Creekmore.
No, that's
No, the young
Barney's.
in black.
Oh, the black, that's Tom Potter. Reverend Potter.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay,
That was definitely him. He wasn't the one in the blue shirt.
okay.
But that's Bob and Tammy.
Oh, yeah. We all rode down together, in fact.
Yep.
Where's
Let's see.
Benny?
Here's,
Oh, who's that guy? No. You passed the,
no, I'll be back there, right there. That guy.
oh my God.
Damn, don't you wish you were looking that good again?
I still got that hat somewhere. That's Chick-fil-A hat. That's the charity ride hat.
Yep.
All right, we gotta get out of here. We gotta go get dinner. I'm hungry.
Can you
Yeah,
answer?
there's a whole lot of pictures from out that way.
I had one question for you. If
Sure.
I can ask you a quick question.
Go for
Bobby
it.
Isaacs. In reading some of his information, they said he set some land speed records.
Yeah, at Bonneville.
Right,
Yeah.
that are still unbroken. And
Well,
they said
but-
with his Dodge,
yeah,
do
but-
they mean his NASCAR car?
But see, they took a big Dodge wing car. I don't even know, that might have been a 1-year deal where they took a bunch of stock cars out there and he was clearly the class of the field. I don't know that they ever went back. So that record may have stood for 40 years or 30 years because nobody ever went back to try to beat
Don't
it.
they still do some stock car speed
I
records?
think
or
mine
no?
was mostly motorcycles and big jet cars and stuff like that. I can find out, but I
I
don't.
was just
Yeah,
curious.
they have different classes so that you can set.
Yeah, but I don't
speed
think
records.
regular 8-cylinder push rod activated.
God, I wish I still had my 1970 Plymouth GTX.
Yeah, I can look it up somewhere.
I actually went looking for one on the internet. There's not one out there that is like it.
Wow.
None. Anywho,
Good night, folks.
we'll catch
Thank you
everybody
very much.
We're out of here.
next week. Oh, let me get to the right spot here so I can click this sucker off. See ya!